Los Angeles after midnight. The city never really sleeps, you know? It just switches gears. Up on that rooftop in downtown, neon signs from the streets below painted everything in shades of electric blue and hot pink. The kind of light that makes you feel like you're in a dream or maybe a nightmare. Hard to tell the difference in LA. Nobody saw it coming. Not even him. Marco Vitelli didn't do spontaneous. He was the guy who planned 3 steps ahead always. The kind of dude who knew which palms to grease, which necks to snap, which secrets to bury 6 feet under. At 32, he built an empire out of the ashes of his father's failed legacy. The Vitelli name meant something again in California. It meant power, fear, respect. But right now, standing on that rooftop with the cold November wind cutting through his expensive suit, Marco felt something he hadn't felt in years: uncertainty. She stood 5 feet away, arms crossed, her dark hair whipping around her face. Sophia Brennan. The daughter of Judge Richard Brennan, the same judge who'd been gunning for Marco's organization for the past 2 years. The same judge who'd sworn in front of cameras and constituents that he'd clean up the streets of Los Angeles, if it was the last thing he did. And here was his daughter, at a party Marco's crew had thrown in some tech billionaire's penthouse. She wasn't supposed to be here. She definitely wasn't supposed to be on this rooftop with him, alone. "You shouldn't be here," Marco said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the wind. Sophia didn't flinch. "Yeah. Well, neither should you, technically. Pretty sure this party's funded by money you definitely didn't earn legally." There was that attitude. That fearless, reckless energy that had caught his attention the moment she walked through the door 2 hours ago. She didn't look at him like everyone else did. No fear, no calculation. Just curiosity. Like she was trying to figure out a puzzle. "You don't know what you're talking about," Marco said, but there was no heat in it. "Don't I?" She stepped closer. Close enough that he could smell her perfume. Something subtle, not trying too hard. "I've been watching you all night, Vitelli. Everyone here is scared of you except me. Want to know why?" He shouldn't engage. Should have walked away right then. But instead, he heard himself ask, "Why?" "Because I grew up around monsters," Sophia said simply. "My dad prosecutes guys like you. I've seen the crime scene photos. I've heard the testimonies. I know exactly what kind of man you are." Marco felt his jaw tighten. "Then you should be running." "Maybe." She tilted her head and the neon lights caught her eyes, hazel, sharp, unafraid. "Or maybe I'm just tired of running from things that scare me." That's when it happened. He didn't plan it. Didn't think. For once in his carefully controlled life, Marco Vitelli acted on pure instinct. He closed the space between them in one step, cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. And the world stopped. Not in some romantic movie bullshit way. It stopped because Marco suddenly understood that everything, every decision, every move, every carefully laid plan, had just gone completely off the rails. Her lips were soft against his and she didn't pull away. Instead, she kissed him back, her hands gripping the lapels of his jacket like she was trying to steady herself. Or maybe pull him closer. He couldn't tell anymore. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marco felt something crack open inside his chest. Something he'd kept locked and buried for years. Fear. Real, genuine fear. Not the kind that comes from a gun pointed at your head or a deal gone wrong. The kind that comes from realizing you just gave someone the power to destroy you completely. "Shit," he breathed, stepping back. Sophia's eyes were wide, her lips slightly parted. For the first time since he'd met her, she looked shaken. What was that?" Marco ran a hand through his dark hair, his heart pounding in a way it never did during business meetings or turf wars. "A mistake. That was a mistake." "Was it?" She was still watching him with that intense gaze and it made his skin feel too tight. "You need to leave," Marco said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Forget this happened. Forget you were here. Forget." "Forget you?" Sophia finished, and something like hurt flashed across her face before she masked it. "Yeah, sure. Whatever you say." She turned to leave and Marco knew he should let her go. Should watch her walk away and never think about this moment again. But he couldn't. "Sophia," he called out. She stopped, glanced back over her shoulder. "You were right," Marco said quietly. "You should be scared of me. Because I'm the kind of guy who ruins everything he touches." Something shifted in her expression, not fear but understanding. Like she'd just seen something in him that nobody else ever had. "Maybe," she said softly. "Or maybe you're just scared of being ruined yourself." Then she was gone, disappearing back into the party, leaving Marco alone on that rooftop with the neon lights and the cold wind and the terrifying realization that his perfectly controlled world had just been blown to pieces. By a single kiss. By the one person in all of Los Angeles he should have stayed away from. By Sophia Brennan. If you're still here, it's because stories like this hit something inside you, that moment when a single decision doesn't just change a night, it detonates everything that comes after. So before we dive deeper into what this kiss really unleashed, hit subscribe and drop a like right now. Not for numbers. Not for ego. But because every time you do, this story reaches someone who's living in their own rooftop moment, standing inches away from the mistake that could burn their whole life down. Stick around. Because from this point on, the line between love and survival gets razor thin, and trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next. People thought Marco Vitelli built his empire out of ambition. Out of greed or hunger for power, or some twisted desire to be the king of LA's underworld. They were wrong. Marco built his empire out of desperation. It started 12 years ago when he was 20 and stupid and thought the world still had room for good guys. His father, Dominic Vitelli, had been small-time, ran a few gambling operations, some loan sharking, nothing major. Enough to keep the family comfortable but not enough to make enemies. Until it was. The Rosselli family controlled most of Southern California back then. Old money, old blood, old grudges. And when Dominic accidentally stepped on their territory, a misunderstanding about a poker game in Long Beach, they decided to make an example. Marco still remembered that night. Coming home from community college to find his mother crying in the kitchen, his father's face beaten so badly he was unrecognizable. And Tony, just 14 years old, sitting in the corner with blood on his shirt that wasn't his own. The Rossellis had sent a message. The Vitellis were nothing. Less than nothing. They didn't deserve to breathe the same air as real players in this city. Marco's father recovered, physically at least. But something broke in him that night. He became paranoid, jumpy, a shadow of the confident man he'd been. Within 6 months, he'd drunk himself to death, and suddenly Marco was the head of a family with no power, no protection, and a lot of enemies who smelled blood in the water. He could have walked away. Should have walked away. Taken Tony and disappeared, started over somewhere the Vitelli name meant nothing. But Marco couldn't let it go. Couldn't accept that his family had been erased like they never mattered. So he did what he had to do. He got smart, got ruthless, and got connected. He started small. Took over his father's old operations but ran them better. Made alliances with guys the Rossellis had pissed off over the years. Learned who to pay, who to threaten, who to eliminate. By the time he was 25, the Vitelli organization was back on the map. By 30 they controlled more territory than the Rossellis ever had. Marco had won. He'd made sure nobody would ever look at his family that way again. But there was a cost. There was always a cost. The secret Marco carried, the one that kept him up at night, the one he'd never told anyone, not even Tony, was about how he'd saved his brother's life 3 years ago. Tony had gotten reckless the way Tony always did. Started dating the daughter of a cartel lieutenant, some narco player from Sinaloa who'd expanded into California. Marco had warned him, told him to break it off, but Tony was in love or thought he was and he didn't listen. When the cartel found out, they took Tony. Just grabbed him off the street in broad daylight. Sent Marco a video of his brother tied to a chair, beaten and terrified, with a simple message. You have 48 hours to deliver $5 million or we send him back in pieces. Marco didn't have $5 million liquid. His assets were tied up in properties, in businesses, in operations that couldn't be liquidated overnight. He was powerful but he wasn't liquid cash rich. Not like that. So he made a deal. Victor Reyes, head of the Sinaloa cartel's LA operations. A stone-cold killer who'd built his reputation on brutality and efficiency. Marco had gone to him directly, walked into the lion's den with nothing but desperation and a proposal. I'll give you Long Beach, Marco had said. Full access to the port, no interference from my people. 20% of whatever you move through there, indefinitely. Victor had studied him with those dead eyes. And what makes you think I won't just take Long Beach anyway after I kill your brother? Because you're smart enough to know a war with me costs more than it's worth. This way you get what you want without bloodshed. We both win. It had taken 36 hours of negotiation, but Victor agreed. He released Tony, and Marco handed over control of his most valuable territory. The port at Long Beach became cartel property, and Marco's organization took the hit. His crew thought he'd made a strategic error. That he'd gotten soft, lost his edge. Some of his lieutenants even tried to challenge him, thinking he was weak. Marco had to put down 2 attempted coups in 6 months just to maintain control. But Tony was alive. That was all that mattered. Except now Marco was tied to the Sinaloa cartel. If they went down, he went down with them. If they expanded into new markets, he had to facilitate it. If they needed something handled in LA, he handled it. He'd become exactly what his father would have hated. A puppet for bigger players, compromised and controlled. And the really messed up part? Tony didn't even know. Marco had told him the ransom had been paid, that everything was handled. Tony never knew his brother had sold out a huge chunk of their empire just to get him back. Marco kept that secret locked deep inside where nobody could find it. Because if anyone knew, if rival gangs knew, if the feds knew, if Tony knew, it would all fall apart. The Vitelli Empire was built on a foundation of compromise and desperation, held together by secrets and lies. And now Sophia Brennan was in his life, asking questions, looking at him with those sharp eyes that saw too much. Getting close to the one person in LA who couldn't afford to let anyone get close. Marco stood from his desk and walked to the window, looking out at the lights of Los Angeles spread below him. His city. His kingdom. His prison. He'd built all of this to protect his family, to make sure the Vitelli name meant something again. But somewhere along the way he'd lost sight of what actually mattered. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Sophia. Still awake? Marco's thumb hovered over the screen. He should ignore it. Should block her number and forget that kiss ever happened. Instead he typed, "Yeah. Can't sleep. Me neither. Keep thinking about you." His chest tightened. "You shouldn't." "I know. But I do anyway. That's the problem. Sophia, you don't understand what you're getting into. So explain it to me." Marco closed his eyes. He couldn't. He couldn't tell her about the cartel, about the blood on his hands, about the compromises he'd made. She'd look at him differently, not with curiosity or attraction but with disgust. The way everyone should look at him. "I can't. Can't or won't. Both." There was a long pause. Then, "Everyone has secrets, Marco. Even me." That caught his attention. "What secrets does the judge's daughter have? The kind that would disappoint him. The kind that prove I'm not the good girl everyone thinks I am." Marco felt something shift in his chest. Curiosity mixed with concern. "You're playing a dangerous game," says the literal crime boss. Despite everything he almost smiled. "Touché. Look, I'm not asking you to spill your whole life story. I want to understand you. That's all." "What?" "Because that kiss felt real. Maybe the realest thing I've felt in years. And I don't think I'm wrong about that." She wasn't. That was the problem. She was absolutely right and Marco had no idea what to do about it. "We can't do this," he typed. "You know we can't." "I know. Doesn't change how I feel. Sophia." "Good night, Marco. For real this time." She went offline again, leaving him standing there with his phone in his hand and that familiar fear creeping back into his chest. Because Marco Vitelli had just realized something terrifying. Sophia Brennan wasn't just different. She was dangerous. Not to his empire or his reputation or his freedom. She was dangerous to his heart. And that was the one thing he'd never learned how to protect. 3 weeks later, Marco's world started crumbling. It began with a phone call at 2 in the morning. Victor Reyes, his voice cold and clipped over the line. "We have a problem, Vitelli." Marco was already awake, had been going over shipping manifests in his office. These days he was always awake. Sleep meant dreams, and dreams meant thinking about things he couldn't afford to think about. Like hazel eyes and sharp wit and text messages that came at midnight. He and Sophia had been talking. Not dating, they both knew better than that. But talking. Meeting sometimes, always in secret. A coffee shop in Pasadena where nobody knew either of them. A late-night drive up the Pacific Coast Highway. Once, memorably, at a 24-hour diner in Koreatown at 3 a.m. where they'd sat in a back booth and talked until the sun came up. Every time he saw her, Marco told himself it would be the last time. And every time he found himself texting her again the next day. What kind of problem? Marco asked Victor, forcing his mind back to business. The kind where someone's been asking questions about our arrangement. Detailed questions. About Long Beach, about our timeline, about who approved what. Victor's voice dropped lower, more menacing. "You got a leak, Vitelli?" Marco's blood ran cold. "No. My people don't talk." "Then you better figure out who's talking because if this gets out, we both go down. And if I go down, I'm taking you with me." Dead serious. The line went dead. Marco immediately called his head of security, a former Marine named Garcia who'd been with him for 5 years. "I need you to check everyone. Phone records, bank accounts, meetings, everything. Someone's been running their mouth about our Long Beach operations." "On it, boss. How deep you want me to go?" "All the way. I don't care who it is, if they're leaking I need to know." But even as Garcia got to work, Marco had a sick feeling in his stomach. Because only a handful of people knew the full details of his deal with the cartel. His inner circle was small, vetted, loyal. If there was a leak, it wasn't from inside his organization. Which meant someone from the outside was digging. 2 days later, Garcia came back with news that made Marco's world tilt sideways. "Boss, you're not gonna like this." Garcia dropped a manila folder on his desk. "Someone's been pulling port records, cross-referencing shipping manifests with known cartel front companies. They've been interviewing dock workers, paying for information about unusual activity around the time you made your deal with Reyes." Marco flipped open the folder, his jaw tightening as he scanned the documents. "Who?" "That's the thing." Garcia shifted uncomfortably. "The requests are coming through legal channels. Someone with access to subpoena power but working quietly. Like they're building a case but keeping it off the books." "The DA's office?" "Maybe. Or..." Garcia paused. "Could be someone working independently. Someone with legal training but not officially on a case yet." The realization hit Marco like a punch to the gut. No. No way. But even as he said it, he knew. Deep down he already knew. Garcia pulled out another sheet. "I did some digging. Found out who's been meeting with some of the dock workers. Paid them cash for information, promised anonymity." He slid a grainy surveillance photo across the desk. Sofia. Standing outside a warehouse in Long Beach, talking to one of the foreman Marco's people had bribed years ago. "Shit," Marco breathed. "You know her?" Garcia asked carefully. Marco didn't answer. Couldn't answer. His mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Sofia had been investigating him. This whole time, while they were talking and texting and getting close, she'd been building a case against him. "Boss?" Garcia prompted. "Leave me alone," Marco said, his voice hollow. "I need to think." After Garcia left, Marco sat there staring at the photo. Sofia looked focused, determined. Wearing jeans and a hoodie, trying to blend in. Playing investigator. His phone buzzed. As if she knew he was thinking about her. "Can we meet tonight? I need to talk to you about something important." Marco's hands shook as he typed back. "Where?" "Our usual spot. The pier in Santa Monica. 10 p.m.? I'll be there." He showed up early, standing at the end of the pier where the tourists didn't usually wander. The ocean stretched out black and endless under the night sky, and the Ferris wheel behind him cast shifting colored lights across the water. Sofia arrived right at 10, bundled in a jacket against the cold ocean breeze. She looked nervous, which was new. Sofia never looked nervous. "Hey," she said softly, coming to stand beside him at the railing. "Hey." Marco kept his eyes on the water. If he looked at her, he might lose his nerve. "So, I need to tell you something," Sofia began. "And you're probably gonna be pissed, but I need you to hear me out first, okay?" "I already know," Marco said flatly. She blinked. "You, what?" He finally turned to look at her, and something in his expression made her take a step back. "I know you've been investigating me. Long Beach, the port operations, the cartel connections. All of it." The color drained from Sofia's face. "Marco. How long?" His voice was sharp, cutting. "How long have you been playing me?" "I wasn't..." She stopped, closed her eyes, took a breath. When she opened them again, there was pain there. Real pain. "It's not like that." "Then what's it like, Sofia? Enlighten me." "I started looking into you before we met," she said quickly. "Before the party, before the kiss, before any of this. My dad's been trying to build a case against you for years, but he can't make anything stick. So I thought if I could find something concrete, something that connected you to the cartels, it would help him finally take you down." Marco's jaw clenched. "And the last 3 weeks? The coffee dates and the late-night talks and the texts? That was all part of your investigation?" "No." Sofia moved closer, her eyes desperate. "No, that was real. I swear to God, Marco, that was all real. I didn't expect..." Her voice cracked. "I didn't expect to actually care about you. But you kept investigating." She looked away, guilt written all over her face. "I couldn't just stop. I'd already started, and people were talking to me, giving me information. I thought I could separate the two things, what I felt for you and what I needed to do for my dad, for justice. But I was wrong. I know I was wrong." Marco laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're messing with fire, Sofia. You don't even realize what you've stumbled into. Then tell me." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "Tell me what I found. Explain it to me, because right now all I have are shipping records and testimony from dock workers who are scared out of their minds. I have pieces of something, but I don't understand what it means." This was it. The moment of truth. Marco could walk away right now, cut her off completely, let her keep digging until she either gave up or got herself killed. Or he could tell her. Tell her everything and trust that whatever they had, whatever this thing between them was, might be strong enough to survive the truth. 3 years ago, Marco said slowly, the Sinaloa cartel kidnapped my brother. They wanted $5 million I didn't have. So I made a deal. I gave them Long Beach in exchange for Tony's life. Full access to the port, protection from my organization, a percentage of everything they move through there. I sold out my own territory to save my brother. Sophia's eyes widened. Oh my God. If that gets out, I'm done. The feds will use it to take down both me and the cartel. My own people will turn on me for compromising our operations. And Tony? Marco's voice cracked slightly. Tony will know that his brother traded everything to save him. He'll never forgive himself. Marco. You wanted the truth, there it is. I'm not just some crime boss building an empire. I'm a guy who made an impossible choice and has been living with the consequences ever since. He pulled his arm free from her grasp. So congratulations, Sophia. You found your evidence. You can bring it to your father, get the prosecution you wanted. Just know that when you do, you're not just destroying me, you're destroying my brother too. Tears were streaming down Sophia's face now. I'm not going to tell my father. Marco stared at her. What? I said I'm not telling him. She wiped at her eyes angrily. You think I could do that after everything? After getting to know you, after seeing who you really are? You don't know who I really am, Marco said bitterly. I'm a criminal, Sophia. I've hurt people, killed people. I've done things that would make your skin crawl. The fact that I love my brother doesn't change that. Maybe not, Sophia said, her voice shaking. But it changes how I see you. It changes everything. She took a shaky breath. I started this investigation to prove you were a monster. But you're not. You're just a person who's made terrible choices for good reasons. And I don't know what to do with that. They stood there in silence, the ocean crashing below them, the Ferris wheel spinning its endless circles behind them. Two people from opposite worlds, caught in something neither of them knew how to handle. What happens now? Sophia finally asked. Marco shook his head. I don't know. I've never been in this situation before. Me neither. She laughed, but it sounded broken. I'm supposed to hate you. My father would disown me if he knew I was here right now. Then why are you here? Sophia looked up at him, and despite the tears, despite the fear and confusion, there was something solid in her gaze. Something certain. Because when I look at you, I don't see a crime boss or a criminal or any of that. I see someone who's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders and refuses to let anyone help. I see someone who's terrified of being vulnerable because vulnerability means weakness in your world. She stepped closer. I see you, Marco. The real you. And I can't just walk away from that. Marco felt something in his chest crack wide open. The fear was still there, but underneath it was something else. Something that felt dangerously like hope. You should walk away, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You should run as far from me as possible and never look back. I know, Sophia whispered. But I won't. And then she kissed him. Soft and desperate and full of all the things they couldn't say out loud. Marco kissed her back, pulling her close, and for just a moment he let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, this could work. But reality came crashing back when his phone buzzed with a text from Garcia. Victor Reyes knows about the leak. He's coming to LA. Says he wants a meeting. Tonight. Marco pulled back from Sophia, dread settling in his stomach like a stone. What's wrong? Sophia asked, seeing his expression. Everything, Marco said grimly. Everything's about to go sideways and I don't know how to stop it. Because the cartel now knew someone was digging into their operations. And they were coming for answers. And the only person who'd been investigating was standing right here in front of him, looking at him with trust and something that might have been love. Marco had thought the hard part was keeping Sophia at a distance. But he'd been wrong. The hard part was going to be keeping her alive. You know what's crazy? Every choice Marco made, he thought it would keep the people he loved safe. But sometimes, the things we do to protect who we care about end up being the reason they get hurt. And I want to ask you something, not as a storyteller but as someone talking to you right now. If you were in Marco's shoes, would you have made the same choice? Drop it in the comments. Tell me what hit you the hardest so far. The betrayal, the desperation, the deal with the cartel, or the fact that the one person who could destroy him is the same person he can't walk away from. Your perspective matters here. When you leave a comment, you're not just typing words, you're helping build a circle of people who feel these stories, who see themselves in the mistakes, in the fear, in the way love shows up at the worst possible moment. So talk to me. What would you have done in Marco's place? I want to hear your take. The meeting with Victor Reyes happened in a warehouse in Vernon, the industrial part of LA where nobody asked questions and everybody minded their business. Marco showed up with Garcia and 2 other guys from his security team, all of them armed, all of them ready for whatever was about to go down. Victor was already there, leaning against a black SUV with 4 of his own people flanking him. He looked exactly like what he was, a cartel lieutenant who'd clawed his way up through blood and brutality. Mid-40s, expensive suit, dead eyes that had seen too much and felt too little. "Vitelli," Victor said, not bothering with pleasantries. "We need to talk about your leak." "There is no leak from my end," Marco said firmly, stopping a few feet away. "My people are solid. Nobody talks. And yet someone's been digging into our arrangement. Someone with resources, with legal knowledge, with access to records that shouldn't exist." Victor pushed off from the SUV, his movements predatory. "So either you're lying about your crew being solid, or you've got a personal problem that's becoming my problem." Marco's jaw tightened. He couldn't mention Sofia. If Victor knew the judge's daughter was investigating them, he'd have her eliminated within 24 hours. No hesitation, no mercy. That's how the cartel operated. "I'm handling it," Marco said. "You better be. Because if this information gets out, if the feds connect me to Long Beach through you, we're all going down. And I don't go down alone, compadre. You understand what I'm saying?" Crystal clear. Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping to something cold and final. "You got 48 hours to plug this leak. I don't care how you do it, pay them off, scare them off, put them in the ground. Just make it stop. Because if I have to come back here again, it won't be for a conversation." He turned and climbed into his SUV, his guys following. The convoy pulled out, leaving Marco standing there with the weight of an impossible situation crushing down on him. Garcia moved closer. "Boss, what are we gonna do?" Marco ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. 48 hours. 2 days to figure out how to protect Sofia without exposing her, how to satisfy the cartel without compromising everything he'd built with her. "I need you to make it look like we found the leak," Marco said slowly. "Someone low-level, someone who could have had access to shipping records. Someone expendable." Garcia's expression darkened. "You want me to set up one of our own guys? I want you to find someone who's already dirty. Someone who's been skimming or talking to rivals or doing something that would justify us cutting them loose. Frame them for the investigation, make it convincing enough that Victor buys it. And if I can't find anyone like that?" Marco's voice went cold. "Then make someone fit the profile. I don't care how you do it, just do it. We need a fall guy and we need them fast." Garcia nodded slowly. "All right. I'll see what I can dig up." After his guys left, Marco sat in his car for a long moment, staring at nothing. This was his life now, making impossible choices, sacrificing pawns to protect the king. Or in this case, to protect the one person who'd somehow become more important than the whole damn chessboard. His phone rang. "Sofia." "Hey," he answered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Are you okay? You sound off." Her concern came through immediately and it made his chest ache. "I'm fine. Just dealing with business." "Marco, don't lie to me. Not after everything." There was a pause. "This is about what I found, isn't it? About the investigation?" He closed his eyes. "Yeah. I can fix this. I'll destroy all the evidence I collected, tell the dock workers to forget they ever talked to me. I'll bury it so deep that..." "It's not that simple, Sofia. The cartel knows someone's been digging. They want answers and they want them now. Then give them to me." Her voice was firm, resolute. "Tell them it was me. I'll take responsibility. No." Marco's voice came out sharper than he intended. "Absolutely not. You don't understand what these people are capable of. If they know you're involved, they'll kill you. No trial, no warning. Just gone. Then what are we supposed to do?" "I'm handling it." "By doing what?" "Marco talked to me. He wanted to. God, he wanted to tell her everything. About Garcia hunting for a fall guy, about Victor's ultimatum, about how Marco was willing to sacrifice anyone and everyone to keep her safe. But that would just make her feel guilty, make her do something reckless to try and fix it. "I need you to trust me," Marco said instead. "Can you do that?" Sofia was quiet for a moment. "You know what's crazy? I do trust you. Despite everything, despite who you are, despite what you've done, I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in my life." Something in Marco's chest cracked a little wider. "You shouldn't. Too late. I already do." He could hear her smile through the phone. So whatever you're planning, be careful. Because I kind of need you to stick around. Sophia. I know we haven't talked about what this is between us. And maybe we can't, not yet. But I need you to know. She took a shaky breath. This isn't just some forbidden attraction thing anymore. Not for me. It's real and it scares the hell out of me, but it's real. Marco gripped the phone tighter. I feel the same way. Then don't do anything stupid. Don't sacrifice yourself trying to protect me. We figure this out together, okay? But that was the problem. Marco had spent his entire adult life making sure nobody else paid for his mistakes. His father had died because Marco couldn't protect him. His mother had wasted away from grief. Tony had almost been killed because Marco wasn't careful enough. He wasn't about to let Sophia become another casualty of his world. I gotta go, Marco said. I'll call you tomorrow. Marco, wait. He hung up before she could finish. Then he sat there in the dark warehouse parking lot, making the hardest decision of his life. The next 36 hours were chaos. Garcia found a guy, Carlo Messina, one of their dock supervisors who'd been embezzling for months. Not enough to cause serious damage, but enough to make him look guilty of bigger crimes. They planted evidence on his computer, manufactured communications that made it look like he'd been talking to federal investigators. It was a frame job, clean and convincing. Carlo would go down for something he didn't do and the cartel would have their leak. Marco hated it. Hated every second of setting up an innocent man, well, semi-innocent, to take the fall. But it was Carlo or Sophia, and that wasn't really a choice at all. The hardest part came when he had to meet with Victor again to present the evidence. They met at the same warehouse, but this time Victor brought Carlo with him, bloody, beaten, barely conscious. Marco's guys had grabbed him the night before, turned him over to the cartel for questioning. "This your leak?" Victor asked, gesturing to Carlo. Marco forced himself to look at the man he'd condemned. "Yeah. He's been skimming money, got nervous about getting caught. Started talking to some legal consultant, trying to cut a deal." "Legal consultant?" Victor's eyes narrowed. "Got a name?" Marco's heart pounded. This was the moment. If he said Sophia's name, it would all be over. Victor would take care of both problems, Carlo and Sophia, and Marco's secret would be safe. But he couldn't. Even now, even faced with the easiest solution, he couldn't do it. "We're still trying to track them down," Marco lied smoothly. "But Carlo's the source. Once he's gone, the leak stops." Victor studied him for a long moment, those dead eyes searching for any sign of deception. Then he nodded slowly. "All right. We'll handle him. But Vitelli? If I find out you're holding back on me, if I find out there's more to this story?" He let the threat hang in the air. "There isn't," Marco said firmly. After Victor left with Carlo, who wouldn't be seen or heard from again, Garcia approached Marco with concern written all over his face. "Boss, you good?" "No," Marco said honestly. "But it's done. The cartel's satisfied, Sophia's safe. That's what matters. At the cost of Carlo's life." "Yeah." Marco's voice was hollow. "At that cost." He went home and poured himself a drink, then another, trying to wash away the feeling of Carlo's terrified eyes, the knowledge that an innocent man, okay, a somewhat innocent man, was dead because Marco couldn't find another way. This was his world. This was what loving someone in his world looked like. Sacrifice and blood and impossible choices. His phone buzzed. "Sophia again. I did something. Don't be mad." Marco's blood ran cold. "What did you do?" "I called my dad. Told him I'd been looking into you and found nothing. Convinced him to back off, said you were just a businessman with a bad reputation. He's dropping his investigation." Marco stared at the message, his mind reeling. She'd gone to her father. She'd lied to Judge Brennan, one of the most respected legal minds in California, to protect Marco. "Sophia, that was incredibly stupid and incredibly dangerous." "I know. But it worked. He believed me. You're safe now." "Safe?" Marco almost laughed. He wasn't safe. He'd never been safe. But she tried to save him anyway, had compromised her relationship with her father, had lied and manipulated and risked everything. Just like he'd done for her. "We need to talk," Marco typed. "In person." "When?" "Now. Meet me at my place." "Your place? Is that safe?" "Nothing about this is safe. But we're past the point of pretending otherwise." 20 minutes later, Sophia was at his door. Marco lived in Bel Air, a compound really, high walls, security cameras, the kind of place that screamed, "Mob boss lives here." He'd never brought her here before, had always met her in neutral territory. But things had changed. Everything had changed. She stood in his living room, looking around at the expensive furniture and original artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. This is quite a setup. It's a prison with nice furniture, Marco said quietly. Sophia turned to look at him and something in her expression shifted. You did something. I can see it on your face. What happened? You wanted to lie. Wanted to protect her from the ugly truth of what he'd done. But they were past lies now. I gave the cartel a fall guy, Marco said. Someone from my organization. They think he was the leak and they handled it. The color drained from Sophia's face. Someone died because of what I did. Someone died because of what we both did. Because of this, Marco gestured between them, whatever this is. That's the reality of my world, Sophia. People die. Innocent people, guilty people, it doesn't matter. When you're with me, there's always collateral damage. Tears filled her eyes. I never meant for. I know. Marco crossed the room, pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his chest and cried, and he held her, feeling her pain like it was his own. I know, baby. But this is what happens. This is why I tried to keep you away. We can't keep doing this, Sophia said, her voice muffled against his shirt. We can't keep hurting people just to be together. I know. But I can't walk away from you either. She pulled back to look at him, her face tear-streaked and beautiful and breaking his heart. I've tried. God knows I've tried. But I can't. Marco cupped her face in his hands. Then we have a problem. Because LA's getting too hot for both of us. Your father's backed off for now, but he's not stupid. He'll figure out eventually that you lied to him. And the cartel's watching me closer than ever. One wrong move, one slip up, and we're both done. So what do? I don't know. Marco pressed his forehead against hers. For the first time in my life, I don't have a plan. I don't have an angle. All I know is that I'm in love with you, and that might be the most dangerous thing I've ever admitted. Sophia's breath caught. You love me? Yeah. The word came out rough, uncertain. I do. I love you and I have no idea what to do about it. She kissed him then, fierce and desperate, and Marco kissed her back like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning. They stumbled toward the bedroom, shedding clothes and inhibitions and the last remnants of pretense. For one night, they could pretend the world outside didn't exist. That they were just two people in love, not a crime boss and a judge's daughter caught in an impossible situation. But morning came as it always did. And with it, the harsh light of reality. Marco woke to find Sophia already dressed, standing by the window and looking out at the city. You're leaving? He said, not a question. I have to. My dad called, he needs me at his office this morning. Something about a new case. She turned to face him, her expression torn. Marco, I meant what I said last night. I love you. But I don't know how we make this work. Every time we're together, someone gets hurt. And I can't keep being the reason people die. You're not. I am. We both are. She crossed to the bed, leaned down to kiss him one last time. Maybe we need to take a step back. Figure out if there's any way for this to work without destroying everything around us. Marco grabbed her hand. And if there isn't? If the only way we can be together is by leaving everything else behind. Sophia's eyes filled with tears again. Then we have to decide what we're willing to sacrifice. Because right now, it feels like we're sacrificing everyone else for our own happiness. And I don't know if I can live with that. She pulled her hand free and walked out, leaving Marco alone in his empty bedroom with the morning sun streaming through the windows and the weight of impossible choices crushing his chest. Love or ruin? That was the question now. Could he have Sophia without destroying everything? His family, his organization, his brother's safety? Or would trying to hold on to her mean watching his entire world burn? Marco didn't have an answer. But he was starting to realize that maybe the only way forward was to burn it all down anyway. Because for the first time in his life, Marco Vitelli had found something worth more than power, more than territory, more than the Vitelli name. He'd found love. And he was terrified it was going to kill them both. 2 weeks of silence. Marco didn't reach out to Sophia and she didn't reach out to him. It was the smart play, give each other space, let the heat die down, pretend they could just walk away from what they'd started. But every day felt like drowning in slow motion. Tony noticed first. Bro, you've been off lately. Like seriously off. What's going on? They were in Marco's office, going over quarterly numbers that Marco couldn't focus on to save his life. The empire was running smoothly, surprisingly smoothly, considering he basically checked out mentally for 2 weeks. But Garcia and the other lieutenants were handling things, and nobody was challenging his authority. Yet. Nothing's going on, Marco said, not looking up from the spreadsheet he wasn't actually reading. Cap, total cap. Tony leaned back in his chair. You've been walking around here like a ghost. You're not sleeping, you're barely eating, and yesterday I caught you just staring at your phone for like 20 minutes. So either you're having some kind of breakdown or... Tony's eyes widened. Oh shit. It's a girl, isn't it? Marco's jaw tightened. Drop it. It is. It's totally a girl. Tony laughed, but there was concern underneath it. Marco, when's the last time you even dated someone? Like actually dated, not just... I said drop it, Tony. Something in Marco's voice made his brother go quiet. Tony studied him for a moment, then said softly, whoever she is, she must be pretty special to have you this messed up. She is. The words slipped out before Marco could stop them. She's special and she's completely wrong for me, and being with her could destroy everything we've built. So yeah, I'm a little messed up about it. Tony whistled low. That bad, huh? Worse. You love her. Marco finally looked up at his brother. Tony was 26, still had that optimistic glint in his eye that Marco had lost somewhere along the way. Tony believed in happy endings, in love conquering all, in all that bullshit that didn't actually exist in their world. But looking at his brother now, Marco couldn't bring himself to crush that hope. Yeah, Marco said quietly. I love her. Then fight for her, man. Whatever the obstacles are, whatever's standing in your way, figure it out. Because you've spent your whole life fighting for this family, for this organization, for everything except yourself. Maybe it's time you fought for something you actually want. Before Marco could respond, his phone rang. Garcia. Boss, we got a situation. Marco's blood ran cold. In his world, situation never meant anything good. What kind of situation? Judge Brennan just called a press conference. He's announcing a major investigation into cartel operations in Southern California. And word on the street is he's got a witness, someone who's been feeding him information about Long Beach. The world tilted. When's the press conference? 1 hour. But Marco. Garcia paused. There's more. The witness is supposedly someone with inside knowledge of your deal with the Sinaloa cartel. Someone who knows details that only a handful of people know. Marco's mind raced. It couldn't be Sofia. She told him she buried the evidence, convinced her father to back off. Unless she'd lied. Unless this whole thing had been an elaborate setup from the beginning. No, he couldn't believe that. Wouldn't believe that. I'm heading to the courthouse, Marco said. Get everyone on alert. If this goes sideways, we might need to move fast. He hung up and found Tony staring at him with wide eyes. The girl, Tony said slowly. It's Judge Brennan's daughter, isn't it? That's why you've been so weird about this. Marco didn't deny it. Couldn't deny it, not anymore. Holy shit, Marco. Are you insane? The guy who's been trying to take us down for years, and you? I know how it looks. It doesn't just look bad, it is bad. If he's got a witness against you, if Sofia's been... She wouldn't. Marco's voice was firm. I know her. She wouldn't do that. You sure about that? Because from where I'm sitting, this looks like the perfect setup. Get close to you, gain your trust, get you to spill about the cartel deal, then use it to bring you down. Marco wanted to argue, wanted to defend Sofia. But a small, paranoid part of his brain was wondering the same thing. What if Tony was right? What if he'd been played this whole time? No. He'd seen the way she looked at him. Felt the way she kissed him. You couldn't fake that kind of connection. Could you? I need to go, Marco said, grabbing his jacket. Marco, wait. If you go to that courthouse, you're walking into a trap. Maybe. But I have to know the truth. The downtown courthouse was packed with reporters when Marco arrived. He stayed in the back, hood up, trying to blend in with the crowd. Judge Brennan stood at a podium, looking grave and determined, the face of justice, ready to clean up the streets. Ladies and gentlemen, Brennan began, today marks a significant development in our ongoing efforts to combat organized crime in Los Angeles. 4 months, my office has been investigating ties between local criminal organizations and Mexican drug cartels. Marco's hands clenched into fists. We now have credible evidence linking the Vitelli crime family to the Sinaloa cartel, specifically regarding operations at the port of Long Beach. This evidence includes testimony from a confidential witness with direct knowledge of an arrangement made 3 years ago, an arrangement that has allowed cartel operations to flourish in our city. The crowd erupted with questions, but Brennan held up a hand. I know there will be many questions and we'll address them in time. But I want to be clear. This investigation is ongoing and we are working with federal authorities to ensure that everyone involved, from the street level to the top of the organization, is held accountable. Marco felt his world crumbling. This was it. This was the end. Everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed for, was about to come crashing down. And the worst part? He couldn't even be sure if the woman he loved had been the one to destroy him. He turned to leave, needing to get out before someone recognized him, but then he heard Brennan say something that stopped him cold. I also want to address the source of this information. My daughter, Sophia Brennan, came to me several weeks ago with concerns about investigative work she'd been conducting independently. Marco's heart stopped. Initially, Sophia was attempting to gather evidence against the betrayal organization on her own. However, during the course of her investigation, she discovered something far more troubling. Evidence that members of my own office had been compromised. That investigators working for me had been accepting bribes from the cartel to bury evidence and derail prosecutions. The crowd gasped. This wasn't the story anyone expected. My daughter brought this information to me at great personal risk, Brennan continued, his voice tight with emotion. She could have stayed silent, could have protected the reputation of this office. Instead, she chose to do what was right even knowing it would cause scandal and potentially end careers, including possibly my own. Marco's mind reeled. Sophia hadn't betrayed him. She protected him by exposing the real corruption in her father's office. The witness who has provided testimony about the betrayal cartel connection is not my daughter, Brennan said firmly. It's Assistant District Attorney David Chin, who has been working with the cartel for the past 5 years. Mr. Chin has agreed to cooperate fully with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. Chin. Marco knew the name, one of Brennan's top prosecutors, someone who'd lost key evidence in cases against Marco's organization multiple times over the years. Marco had always assumed the guy was just incompetent. Turned out he was on the cartel's payroll. This investigation will continue, Brennan said, but it will be conducted with integrity and transparency. I want to thank my daughter for her courage in bringing this corruption to light, even though it has deeply embarrassed this office and myself personally. The press conference dissolved into chaos as reporters shouted questions. Marco slipped out the back, his mind racing. Sophia had saved him. She'd found evidence that would have destroyed him, but instead of using it, she dug deeper and uncovered the real story, the corruption that had been protecting the cartel and making Marco look like the bigger threat. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Meet me at our spot. The rooftop where it all started. Please. Marco didn't hesitate. He drove across town like a man possessed, breaking every traffic law on the books. The building where they'd first kissed was empty now, the party long over, but the rooftop access was still unlocked. She was already there, standing at the same spot where they'd stood 2 months ago. She looked exhausted, her eyes red like she'd been crying. You came, Sophia said, her voice barely above a whisper. Of course I came. Marco crossed the rooftop, stopping just a few feet away from her. Sophia, what you did was the only thing I could do. She wrapped her arms around herself. I found the evidence about you and the cartel. I had everything I needed to bring you down. But then I kept digging because something felt off. Why were there so many holes in my dad's previous cases against you? Why did evidence keep disappearing? Chin, Marco said. Chin, she confirmed. He's been sabotaging cases for years, taking cartel money to make sure the real investigations never went anywhere. And he was getting ready to pin everything on you, not because you're innocent but because taking you down would distract from the real corruption. Marco shook his head in disbelief. You saved me. I saved us both, Sophia corrected. Because if I'd turned you in, if I'd given my father that evidence about Long Beach, the cartel would have known I was the source. They would have killed me, Marco. You told me that yourself. So you found another way. I found the truth. She finally looked at him, and the pain in her eyes nearly broke him. But that doesn't change what you did. That doesn't erase the deal you made with the cartel or the people who've been hurt because of it. I can love you and still know that what you do is wrong. I know. And you can love me and still understand that I can't just ignore it. I can't pretend that being with you doesn't make me complicit in some way. Marco felt his chest tighten. So what are you saying? I'm saying we have a choice to make. Sophia stepped closer. Your brother told me something yesterday. Yeah, we talked, don't look so surprised. He said you've spent your whole life fighting for everyone else. Fighting to protect your family, to build something that would keep them safe. But you've never fought for yourself, for what you actually want. Tony talks too much. He's right though. She reached out, placed her hand over his heart. You're standing at a crossroads, Marco. You can keep going the way you've been going, making deals with cartels, sacrificing innocent people, building an empire on blood and compromise. Or you can choose something different. Different how? Walk away, Sophia said simply. From the organization, from the cartel, from all of it. Take Tony and disappear. Start over somewhere the Vitelli name doesn't mean anything. Marco stared at her. You're asking me to give up everything. I'm asking you to save yourself. Because right now you're on a path that ends in prison or death or both. And her voice cracked. I can't watch that happen. I love you too much. If I walk away, the cartel comes after me. After Tony. They don't just let people leave. Then we make a deal, Sophia said. My father has Chen's testimony. He has evidence of cartel corruption at every level. We can use that as leverage. You give the feds everything you know about the Sinaloa cartel's operations in California, and in exchange you get immunity and witness protection for you and Tony. It was insane. It was brilliant. It was terrifying. I'd be a rat, Marco said. Everything my father stood for, everything I built, it would all be for nothing. Or it would be for everything that actually matters. Sophia cupped his face in her hands. Your father's dead, Marco. He's been dead for 12 years. And you've been carrying his ghost around, trying to make the Vitelli name mean something. But at what cost? How many more people have to die? How many more deals do you have to make with monsters? Marco closed his eyes, feeling tears he didn't know he could still cry. I don't know how to be anything else. Then learn, Sophia whispered. With me. We'll figure it out together. He opened his eyes and looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd risked everything to save him. Who'd chosen him over her father's approval, over her career, over everything she'd been raised to believe in. Tony was right. Marco had spent his entire life fighting for everyone else. Maybe it was time he fought for himself. Okay, Marco said, his voice rough with emotion. Okay, I'll do it. I'll walk away from everything, testify against the cartel, go into witness protection. But only if you come with us. Sophia's eyes widened. Marco. I'm serious. If I'm burning my whole life down, if I'm starting over, I'm not doing it without you. You're the only reason any of this is worth it. My father will never forgive me. I know. I'll lose my career, my reputation, everything I've worked for. I know. We'll be in witness protection. New names, new lives, always looking over our shoulders. I know. Marco pulled her closer. But we'll be together. And for the first time in my life I'll be free. Really free. Not from the law or the cartels, but from the weight of trying to be someone I'm not. Sophia was crying now, but she was smiling too. This is crazy. Completely insane. We'll probably regret it. Definitely. But I love you, Sophia said, and I'm tired of pretending that's not enough reason to risk everything. Marco kissed her then, soft and slow and full of promise. This wasn't like their first kiss, desperate and forbidden and dangerous. This was different. This was a choice they were both making with open eyes. So what happens now? Sophia asked when they pulled apart. Marco pulled out his phone, scrolled to Garcia's number. His finger hovered over the call button for a moment. Once he made this call, there was no going back. No changing his mind. He'd be betraying everyone who'd ever been loyal to him, destroying everything his father had started. But he'd also be saving Tony. Saving Sophia. Saving himself. Now, Marco said, I make a phone call, set up a meeting with the FBI, and then we run like hell before the cartel figures out what's happening. Together? Together. He made the call. Within 3 hours, Marco and Tony were in federal custody, cutting a deal that would dismantle the Sinaloa cartel's operations in California. Within a week, they were in witness protection. New names, new city, new lives. Sophia came with them. Left her father a letter explaining everything, apologizing for nothing. Judge Brennan wouldn't understand, probably wouldn't forgive. But that was okay. Some choices weren't about getting forgiveness. They were about saving the people you loved. 6 months later, in a small town in Oregon where nobody knew the name Vitelli and nobody cared, Marco, now Michael Torres, stood in a kitchen making breakfast while Sophia, now Sarah, laughed at something Tony, now Thomas, had said. It wasn't perfect. They all had nightmares sometimes. Jumped at loud noises. Checked over their shoulders more than normal people did. The marshals assigned to them said it would fade with time, but Marco wasn't sure it ever really would. But you know what? It was enough. Because for the first time since that night his father was beaten, Marco wasn't carrying the weight of an empire. Wasn't making deals with devils. Wasn't sacrificing pieces of his soul just to keep the Vitelli name relevant. He was just a guy making pancakes for the woman he loved and the brother he'd saved. And that morning, when Sophia came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist and pressed her face against his back, Marco understood something he'd never understood before. It wasn't the beijo, the kiss, that had destroyed his life. It was what he'd felt after it. That moment of vulnerability, of connection, of real, terrifying love. That kiss had shown him there was more to life than power and fear and blood. It had shown him he was capable of something he'd thought was lost forever: hope. So yeah, the kiss had destroyed Marco Vitelli's life. But it had saved Michael Torres's soul. And standing there in that kitchen, with the morning sun streaming through the windows and Sophia's arms around him and his brother's laughter filling the air, Michael, whoever he was now, knew he'd made the right choice. Because love wasn't supposed to be easy. It wasn't supposed to make sense or be convenient or fit neatly into the life you'd already built. Love was supposed to wreck you, rebuild you, and show you who you really were underneath all the armor. And Michael Torres, formerly Marco Vitelli, had finally learned that lesson. The hard way. The only way that mattered. The way that set him free.